Trajan's death shook Rome. The empire had never stretched so far, never glowed so brightly, never marched so confidently into the unknown. But great expansion brings great cost, and Rome now stood dangerously overextended. In the days following Trajan's death, the empire waited anxiously for news of his successor. But the decision had already been made quietly, privately, in the fading breath of Rome's greatest conqueror. Trajan had chosen Publius alias Hadrianus. Hadrianus. A man unlike any emperor before him. Hadrianus. Solely by war, he was a thinker, an architect, a philosopher with the discipline of a soldier. He had served under Trajan for years, studied every frontier, every culture, every weakness and strength of the empire. He did not dream of conquering the world. He dreamed of preserving it. But Rome was not ready for a leader like him, the Senate murmured. Some doubted his legitimacy, whispering that Trajan's wife, Plotina, had forced the adoption after Trajan's death. Others saw him as too Greek, too intellectual, a man more in love with books and temples than with the sword. But Hadrian wasted no time proving he understood the empire better than anyone. One of his first actions shocked the military elite. He abandoned Trajan's newly conquered eastern territories. Too many senators. It seemed like cowardice. To Hadrian, it was survival. Rome could not defend land stretching thousands of miles beyond its natural borders. The empire needed strength, not overstretched ambition. And so Hadrian made a promise to himself and to Rome. I will defend what we have, not chase what we cannot keep. And with that, an era of consolidation began. Hadrian became a traveler emperor, the most well-traveled ruler Rome had ever known. He visited every province, walking among citizens and soldiers alike. He inspected fortresses, repaired roads, rebuilt cities, and studied the problems of the empire firsthand. No emperor had ever cared this deeply about the edges of Rome. His journeys took him north, into the mist-covered lands of Baetania, where Rome's borders blurred into forests and tribes who refused to kneel. Here, Hadrian saw something other emperors ignored. Rome could not rule the world by force alone, so he drew a line in stone. Hadrian's wall rose across the width of Britain, an immense barrier of stone. Towers, forts, and legions that stretched like a scar across the landscape. More than a wall, it was a message. This is Rome. Beyond this, you will go no further. It was one of the most ambitious engineering projects the ancient world had ever seen. And it worked. The border stabilized. Trade flourished. Rome breathed easier. But Hadrian's genius wasn't limited to military strategy. He reshaped cities with a passion for architecture. He designed temples, theaters, statues, villas, leaving behind an artistic legacy unmatched by any emperor. The crown jewel of his vision rose in Tivoli, a sprawling masterpiece of gardens, fountains, and palaces, the Villa of Hadrian. Yet behind his achievements lay a complicated man. Hadrian was deeply philosophical, drawn to Greek culture, poetry, and intellect. He surrounded himself with artists, writers, thinkers, people who challenged him, questioned him, and inspired him. And then came the figure who would change his life forever, Antinous. A young man from Bithynia, whose beauty, intelligence, and gentleness captured Hadrian's heart. Their bond, romantic, spiritual, inseparable, became one of the most talked-about relationships of the ancient world. But tragedy struck suddenly. During a journey down the Nile, Antinous was drowned under mysterious circumstances. Some claimed it was an accident. Others whispered of ritual sacrifice that Antinous had given his life to restore Hadrian's fading health. The truth is lost to time. What remains is the depth of Hadrian's grief. The emperor who stood unshaken before armies, who defied senators and reformed the empire. Satyr. In memory of Antinous, Hadrian did what no emperor had ever done. He declared him a god. Temples were built. Cities were named after him. His face appeared in marble everywhere from Egypt to Britannia. It was an act of devotion that historians still debate, an echo of love carved into eternity. But mourning could not distract Hadrian from the empire's greatest challenge. Judea, a land where tensions between Romans and Jewish populations had simmered for decades. Hadrian attempted reforms, even planned to rebuild Jerusalem into a Roman city. Instead, it ignited a firestorm, the Bar Kokhba Revolt, one of the bloodiest uprisings in Roman history. The war dragged on for years. Cities burned. Legions fell. Hadrian, the emperor of peace and preservation, was forced into the darkest chapter of his reign. Rome won, but at a terrible cost. Afterward, Hadrian reshaped Judea, completely renaming it, rebuilding it, dispersing its people. It was a victory that weighed heavily on him. The philosopher-emperor had been forced to commit acts of brutality to keep the empire whole, and as age crept upon him, so did illness. Hadrian spent his final years trapped inside his own body, weakened and tormented by pain. He could not travel, could not build, could not explore, but he could prepare. Like Nerva and Trajan before him, Hadrian knew Rome needed a worthy successor. After much hesitation, he chose a disciplined, respected man, Antoninus Pius. A choice that would lead to the next great emperor and the next generation of Rome's golden age. Hadrian had preserved the empire, Trajan had expanded it. Nerva had restored it. But Hadrian, the builder, the traveler, the philosopher, ensured the empire would survive the storms that lay ahead. And in Part 8, the story continues with the emperor whose reign would become the most peaceful in Roman history, Antoninus Pius, the gentle emperor who ruled without blood.